Hello, welcome to our Ask Me Anything session about ranked choice voting in Salt Lake City. I'm your host and moderator, Brian Young from Salt Lake City TV. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be taking questions from the public in the Facebook comment section of this video, so please leave your comments there. Our communications team will be there collecting those questions so that we can answer them right here live on the air. For those who don't know, ranked choice voting is a voting method which the legislature offered to cities to use this election instead of what is known as traditional voting. Ranked choice voting allows voters to select candidates in their preferred order and rank up to 10 of them. Under ranked choice voting, if a candidate does not outright win over 50% of the vote, candidates are eliminated in batches from bottom to top. When a candidate is eliminated, the voters' vote transfers to their second choice, and the process continues until there's a clear winner. Salt Lake City was among the 23 municipalities that opted into this voting method. Before we get to the questions, though, let me introduce our panel of experts. Here today are authorities on elections from Salt Lake City and the Lieutenant Governor's Office who've been working with the 23 cities to spread awareness and educate voters on this new method. So first is Hayden Loftus, an election specialist from the Lieutenant Governor's Office, and then we have Lauren Schaefer, the Deputy City Recorder from Salt Lake City. Both are election officials who will be working on ranked choice voting this election cycle. Welcome both, and thank you both for being here. And before we get into the questions, Hayden, you've got a short presentation on ranked choice voting for us, right?
I do, yes. Thank you so much, Brian. Let me go ahead and share my screen real quick with everyone. We'll get this pulled up. Okay, so just like Brian mentioned, my name is Hayden Loftus, and I am an election specialist with the Lieutenant Governor's Office. I just wanted to give a quick, brief overview of what we're looking at for ranked choice voting. As Brian mentioned, in a nutshell, ranked choice voting allows candidates to rank their candidate choices with regard to their preference, in order of preference. So first choice, second choice, third choice, etc. It's pretty easy to think about this in terms of your favorite ice cream. So in the voting, if one candidate gets 50% plus one, so a majority vote in the first round, that candidate's the winner of the election. However, if a candidate doesn't meet that 50% plus one threshold, then the instant runoff voting process begins. And Brian talked a little bit about that, but essentially how it works is the candidate with the least amount of votes is eliminated. And those voters who had that candidate as their first choice are now able to use the candidate they picked as their second choice. So that second choice candidate gets their vote. The process then continues eliminating candidates until there is a candidate that has that 50% plus one. So again, if you're thinking about it in terms of ice cream and you are ordering scoops of ice cream, you'll kind of narrow things down a little bit if your first choice isn't available. So if you're a big fan of chocolate and they don't have that, you'll immediately go to your second choice, which might be vanilla or pistachio or any number of different things. So it all started in 2018 when the Utah legislature passed HB 35, which is the Municipal Alternate Voting Method Pilot Project. And this created that pilot project that allows municipalities across the state to conduct these nonpartisan races using that instant runoff voting system. The bill passed 67-3 in the House and 22-0 in the Senate. And when Governor Herbert signed the bill into law in March of 2018, it went into effect for different cities to participate. And it started in the 2019 municipal elections with Payson and Vineyard. Those were our two cities that kind of jumped into it. Both cities saw great success. They were very happy with how things turned out, and they ended up opting into it again in the year for 2021 in those municipal elections. So this year, instead of just two cities, we had 23 different cities opt into this pilot program. I'm not going to run through this list, but you can see that it covers a lot of the state. It goes all over the place. So we had a lot of different populations, a lot of different city sizes, and just a lot of different people that were interested in seeing how this would work for their cities and for these elections. So where else is this going on across the nation? Not only in the state, up north and down south and in the middle with Salt Lake City, but we see ranked choice voting elections taking place in Maine, which is kind of statewide. We've seen it in California for Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, New York City. Minnesota has a bunch of different cities. And then there's also a ton of different locations in Oregon, New Mexico, Colorado, and Massachusetts. So it's spread pretty far across the nation as these different cities are trying out this new ranked choice voting instant runoff method. So as I mentioned previously, this is kind of how it's going. We have 23 cities, and we're hoping to gain a lot of insight. 2 cities out of all of the different cities in the state of Utah was a great start, but 23 cities and the voters in those cities and the candidates participating in those elections is going to give us a lot more insight into how people are feeling about this and how it might work in the future. So like I said, we've got cities all across the state. We've got Nibley up in the northern part, we've got Moab down in the southern part, and we've got Salt Lake City right in the middle. And election day is right around the corner. So make sure you guys are getting set and figured out how to use that ranked choice voting ballot to make sure you can get the most out of it for your different candidate choices. And just a little brief overview for what my office is doing and how we're involved. The Lieutenant Governor is the chief election officer for the state. And so we've been working really hard to make sure all of the elections are moving forward and they're working well, not only for ranked choice voting, but every election that's taking place in the state. But we are involved in ranked choice voting in promoting for outreach and education in a partnership with the cities and the counties as well. So we're working closely to make sure that people know what is going down with these ranked choice voting elections so that people can avoid any kind of confusion and can really take advantage of some of those different system processes that ranked choice voting has to offer. And now, just as Brian mentioned, we're going to open it up to questions. So I'll close my screen and we can get moving right on.
Yeah, thank you so much for that overview. And just as a reminder for everyone, we will be taking questions through the Facebook comments section. So if you're watching live, be sure to use that. We'll get those questions and we'll take them to our panel here. The first question I want to ask, and I want to start with Lauren here. What's the appeal of ranked choice voting? Why can that be advantageous?
Things. One of the big reasons I've heard most cities opt into it is that it saves a large chunk of taxpayer funds due to the lack of a primary. A primary election can cost between $40,000 to $70,000 depending on what's on your ballot. So it's quite a decent amount of money we save. One of the other big pros is that candidates are fighting to be a second and third choice. And so they're a lot more civil with each other during the campaign process because they can't openly go out and attack a candidate because that could mean that they wouldn't end up being a second or third choice. Those are just the 2 main ones that we've seen the most this year.
Hayden, are these the sorts of reasons you're seeing from the cities that have opted in from the Lieutenant Governor's office? What other appeal has there been that you've heard from across all of these municipalities?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with what Lauren said. It's really big for cities to not necessarily have to worry about the cost of a primary election. Every candidate essentially that files the declaration of candidacy makes it through to the general election. So that can get fairly big ballots, but where you're offering an opportunity for a second, third, fourth, fifth, however many choices are offered on that ballot, it creates an opportunity for these different candidates to really work kind of with each other and almost create an opportunity where they're building rather than tearing down. Those are probably the 2 biggest. The other thing that we've seen is it's just a good opportunity for a city to easily and quickly fill multiple positions. Just like Lauren was mentioning, if you have 2 seats open, for example, you're able to have a first round winner essentially, and then you're able to use those same votes to determine the second round winner, and both winners end up with the majority of the votes. So every vote is heard in some manner or in some way, rather than just, well, my candidate didn't get a majority, so they're just out. You still have an opportunity to have a voice in those elections.
So we're getting into October, right? Like election season's like right around the corner. It's just a couple weeks away. I'm a voter in Salt Lake City. What should I be expecting to see, and how should I be filling this ballot out? Walk me through that. What should I expect?
Yeah, I can take that. Ballots went out at the beginning of last week. So most Salt Lake City voters should have their ballots, and if they don't, they'll be getting them throughout this week. And luckily or not luckily, Salt Lake City voters only have 1 item on their ballots this year, and it's just city council races. We have District 1, 3, 5, and 7 up, and then we had a vacancy in District 2, so there's a 2-year term up in District 2 as well. So Districts 4 and 6 will not be receiving ballots this year, but 1, 3, 5, 7, and 2 will be, and it's just city council races. Our biggest race is 5 candidates and our smallest is 3. So everyone voting this year will be voting with a ranked choice ballot. So we're really excited about it. We didn't have any races that went up to 10, which is the maximum that Salt Lake County could allow us to rank with their tabulation equipment. So it's really fortunate for Salt Lake City voters that they can rank all of the candidates on their ballot this year.
Has this changed anything in how constituents and voters need to turn in their ballots? Or is it the same process? I can drop it off at a drop box or send it in the mail? Or what has any of that changed?
Nope, it's all still the same. Ballots need to be postmarked by November 1st or on November 1st. And then anyone who doesn't mail their ballot in on that date can drop it off at a ballot drop box or at a polling location on the 2nd. We do have limited polling locations. You can find those on the slc.gov/elections website. And that'll also have a list of all of your drop boxes as well. But nope, it's all the same. Anything you're used to in a normal election will happen the same way this year.
Hayden, I'm really curious about the way the votes are tabulated. Is this something that's different by city, or are all the cities that are in the pilot program tabulating the results the same way? How are the results tabulated, really?
Yeah, that's a good question. And being part of the Lieutenant Governor's office, we don't actually we don't tabulate votes in our office. So most of what the knowledge I have is gained from the different counties. But essentially how it works is the way that votes are going to be tabulated is set forth in code. The process that I talked about with the last candidate being eliminated and the rest of those votes being distributed throughout the different candidates on a second and third choice process, that is in code. So that's something that has to be followed. The different programs that may do that can vary kind of county to county. I know Salt Lake County and Utah County may be doing different processes through that system, but essentially the mathematical equations and the formulations to how to get those numbers are going to be the same because it's set forth in code.
Have there been any cities that have been forced to drop out of the list or had to cancel their election or anything like that? That sort of thing doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah, we actually have had a couple that have essentially canceled their election, but it's for a better reason than most people would think. It's not because of any issues or situations that arose that they weren't expecting. It's essentially what happens when not enough candidates declare their candidacy and want to run. So I believe it was Payson and I believe 2 other cities, and I think they're Genola and maybe Goshen, but they essentially didn't have enough candidates for their races. They only had 1 candidate apply for each position. And so they were able to cancel their election because there's no one to run against. So they weren't backing out because of the ranked choice voting. They weren't backing out because of issues or scandals. They just didn't have enough candidates. And so they were able to essentially cancel that election and just declare their winners now.
One question I want to ask, and maybe Lauren, you can take a crack at this, but I'm really interested in, Hayden mentioned that this was a completely nonpartisan sort of decision to allow cities to do this. The races here in Salt Lake City are nonpartisan, and I just wanted to know if you could speak to the nonpartisan nature of the races and sort of why that might be a good thing for Salt Lake City.
Yeah, so in Salt Lake, like you mentioned, our city council members are nonpartisan. So they may affiliate with a party on like a personal level, but as a candidate, they don't. They just run for their district, which makes it really cool because it means that they essentially have to engage more with their constituency and their voters. It's not about, oh, I'm running with this party, please vote for me if that's what your affiliation leans with, or if you're unaffiliated, vote for me because I'm unaffiliated. It means that they have to have a better understanding of the issues at hand and what their voters are looking for. It also means that the voters have to be more engaged because they can't just vote via party. They have to know what their candidates are thinking and doing and what their belief system sort of aligns with, which makes it a really cool process because you can rank as well, like we've said. One of the things that I've noticed, at least during the declaration of candidacy period, was we had a few candidates come in who said they were really excited about ranked choice voting and the fact that they didn't have to like affiliate with a party because it gave them more opportunity to get involved. They weren't so scared of having a primary and rushing to get done in a primary or having to affiliate with a party to sort of get that, trying to think of the word I'm looking for, like exposure. But So we've seen a lot of benefits from it just because our candidates are super engaged and involved. I know most of them have knocked on almost every door in their district at this point. And we've also seen a lot of candidates who basically told us during the declaration period they would not have declared otherwise. So it's been really beneficial for Salt Lake to just have more opportunity for people to get involved.
I want to ask a question that's sort of a hypothetical, but say this goes really well. This pilot program goes really well in Salt Lake City. The council adopts doing that again, and we have that for the next election that has a statewide election or a federal election. Will we see our ballots split at that point in the types of voting that we're doing? Or is this something, if the city decides that we want to go with ranked choice voting, we do that across the board for our federal elections and our state elections as well? What's the situation there hypothetically if this pilot goes really well?
So currently, and Hayden, feel free to cut me off at any point. Currently, cities can only opt in on odd number years, which means it's only municipal elections. So no statewide or federal elections would be able to be RCV yet. The pilot program lasts until 2026. So municipalities have until then to opt into the program. And then at that point, the legislature, I assume, and this is maybe where Hayden can cut me off, I assume at that point, they'll evaluate the option as a permanent, like they'll see if it needs to become a permanent option for cities. And then I think that's where you could see it potentially start to become a larger option. But I think that's something that's so far out that we just don't have any information on it. But currently, all cities can opt in until 2026.
Yeah, and if you're okay with me jumping in for just a second,
Please,
that's
please.
spot on. Right now, it is kind of restricted just to municipal elections on odd numbered years. We're still trying to build that knowledge database from the cities on how they feel about it, if it's working, if it's not working. The Lieutenant Governor's office doesn't see it working statewide, to be honest. It creates a lot of issues with tabulations, making sure that there's a central location where all of that is done. Right now, all of that tabulation and the counting of the ballots and the votes takes place at a county level, and it's very secure and just set in a good policy and procedure. There's a way it's done. If we were to go to a statewide ranked choice voting, we would have to have a central location, and we feel that creates more issues than it might solve. So from our stance, we don't see it really working statewide, but we do understand the benefit of having those different pilot program options for the municipalities right now.
Speaking of the Lieutenant Governor's office and how they oversee elections, just a little bit of a history lesson. Could you tell me why the Lieutenant Governor's office why this is in the purview of that office and how that has evolved over the years?
Yeah, so essentially how it works, and let me just clarify the question just so I understand. You're talking about in terms of ranked choice voting being municipalities and how elections and how we oversee them. Is that kind of the right thing that we're looking at?
The Lieutenant Governor's office has been sort of traditionally, as far as I've been aware, in charge of elections. And that's sort of the way it always is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, generally, I think essentially in code, how it works out, the Lieutenant Governor herself is the chief election officer for the state. More often than not, we act as an overseer of these elections, where a lot of the control and the ability to kind of pick and choose what they want is given to the counties and the cities. We do have state code that governs a lot of different things, but there are opportunities where the different counties can kind of decide how they want to go through things or how cities may want elections to be done. That's kind of where ranked choice voting came in, is it's another opportunity for cities to differentiate themselves and find what works best for their people. But in the end, the Lieutenant Governor's office, we have a code that we have to enforce. We have to make sure that different cities and counties are following the procedures, the codes that are set in place, the statutes that are given, to make sure that that security level and the integrity of the elections are secure, strong, and constantly moving forward. It's nice to have that overseer ability without having it be, for lack of a better word, a dictatorship. We're able to really work with those counties to make sure that their elections are running in the way that they want.
As ranked choice voting has become an option, in 2019, you had just two cities with Vineyard and Payson
Mhm.
jumping into ranked choice voting. And then now you have 23 cities. How has that changed things in the lieutenant governor's office as far as ranked choice voting is concerned?
Yeah, I think the biggest change we saw was by eliminating the need for the primary elections in the ranked choice voting system. We essentially created two time periods where candidates could declare their candidacy. We have a time period in June where different candidates can declare their candidacy for the general elections. And then we had a time period right after the primary elections in August where ranked choice voting candidates would declare their candidacy. That's probably the biggest thing for us, because once it gets to the general election, that process is the same. But we had to make sure we were prepared and ready with these cities and counties for two different time periods where we were trying to keep track of the candidates who had declared for a primary, kind of make sure those primary elections went through, and then immediately jump into a new declaring period for those ranked choice voting candidates where they were able to come into the office and state that the office that they were running for and the city they were with and the county. And then on top of all that, even before, we had to worry about what cities were actually going to participate. You know, they have an opportunity up until a date in May, it escapes the top of my mind, of where they can either opt in or opt out. And so some cities, you know, kind of mull it over and think about it, and they might go and they might not. Meanwhile, we're just waiting to see what kind of information we'll have. But overall, the end result is going to be the same, with results that come from these elections where people have the opportunity to cast their ballot, cast their vote, it gets tabulated, and then we're able to put those results up for everyone to see.
One question I have is at the end of this pilot program, what happens? Lauren, the Salt Lake City Recorder's Office will file a report saying the city loved or hated this somehow, and the Lieutenant Governor's Office takes that information and like, where does it go from there? What happens? You know, what's the next step after the pilot program is over?
Yeah, so for our office, our next step, once sort of the election period is over, which is late November, we'll start basically surveying our candidates and going from there and getting that information. And then any information that we compile into a report will likely present to the city council and also pass along to the lieutenant governor's office just for their information. And then we decide again in 2023 if the city would like to remain or if they would like to go back to traditional voting. And if they chose to remain, we'd just let the lieutenant governor's office know. And if they chose they wanted to go back to traditional voting, we'd have to notify them as well. So basically from here, the decision making goes back to the city council on what they want to do for the next election.
And then Hayden, will the Lieutenant Governor's Office be compiling all of this stuff to hand to, is it the state legislature that's going to have the ultimate to say here?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be working to really, like I mentioned earlier, build that database so that we know how not only voters feel about it, but also the candidates and whether that impacts their decision to run or not. Election officials at the county level, city level, state level, we're going to be making sure that we know how everybody really feels, whether they think it's beneficial or not. We'll be collecting a lot of data once this kind of cycle ends to make sure we really communicate with those 23 different cities. And then we'll pass that on to the legislature and they'll kind of review it and figure out how they want to proceed and whether they continue to extend that deadline of the municipality pilot program or not. It's going to be up to them, but we will definitely do everything we can to collect as accurate data as possible.
One question I have for both of you, maybe this is a better question for you, Hayden, or maybe Lauren, I'm not sure. Is it going to take longer to see results because there's much more math involved rather than just counting? Is it going to take us longer to see who won? Are we going to be able to see that on election night?
I can definitely talk to this a little bit, and then Lauren, you probably have a little bit more knowledge from working with the Salt Lake County's office and figuring that out. But from my understanding and from the communications we've had, it kind of depends. If in that first round there's a candidate who gets a majority right off the bat, the results could be released a little bit quicker, but we're really going to have to work to collect all of those ballots first. And when I say we, I mean the election officials. Again, the lieutenant governors doesn't do office. We don't do any of the tabulation. So those ballots are going to have to be collected and make sure that we get every vote counted as long as it's a valid vote, to make sure we really have those results before we can release anything. But Lauren, you probably speak to that a little bit more than I can.
Yeah, the statutory deadline to certify the election is November 16th. So we have to have basically our results certified by that day, but Salt Lake City is planning to certify ours on that day. But what you'll see after talking to Salt Lake County is we'll get a large, basically, amount of ballots that come in just from people who already have their ballots right now. And those results will be released on election night. And then every time Salt Lake County tabulates, they'll have to post those results that day as well. So we'll see large chunks throughout that 2-week period. But the way the equipment works is it stores all the second and third choice votes, but it counts the first choice. So basically what will happen is they're just keeping track of the first choice to see if anyone's over that 50%. And then the more ballots come in and the closer they get to the end, the tabulation software will start pushing through if there's no clear winner, it'll start eliminating based off of batches, which is why it's being held out so close to the end, just to make sure that all those valid ballots get in. But if they all come in and everyone's voting early like they can right now, we could see results like a clear winner much sooner. But just based on the elimination rounds, there's a good chance that it'll be closer to the 16th, but not necessarily on it, that we'll find out.
Lauren, I'm curious, as we've got the mail-in voting, we've got early voting, we've got ranked choice voting now, we're sort of adding a whole bunch of options as far as voting goes. You talked a little bit about it earlier, but I'm wondering if you can elaborate, and especially if there's more information now that we're in the midst of the election, how is this impacting the budget for Salt Lake City as a municipality?
Yeah, so we, like I mentioned earlier, because we didn't have a primary, we saved, I want to say it was $50,000. It was quite a large chunk of money. And because of that, we had a lot of money to essentially move into awareness and still, quite frankly, save money. So our budget, it's been pretty fortunate. We've had a large awareness budget. I hope that people are seeing all the ads that we've put out. Most Salt Lake City residents should have a postcard hit their mailbox. That's what some of it was spent on. But the rest just went back, I believe, into the general fund of the city. So it saves the city a large chunk of money. And then we allocated a little bit of it to help with awareness so that voters weren't shocked when they got a ballot that looked differently than what they were used to.
So I want to say, for any of you watching, if you do have a question, now's the time. We're getting pretty close to wrapping up, but we want to make sure that we answer your questions. If you have any, please drop them in the Facebook comments below the video, and we'd love to get to those. But as we wind closer to wrapping up, I've only got a couple more questions for Lauren and Hayden on my own. The next one I'm really curious about, because this seems like if I'm a voter and I'm really accustomed to just picking one person I want to vote for, what happens in a ranked choice voting election if I just decide to only vote for my one candidate?
Yeah, I can take that, Hayden. There's essentially nothing wrong with it. You're basically acting as if it's traditional voting. The upside is that you love one candidate so much that you're ranking them as your first choice and you don't have a second or third. And then the second point is basically that if that candidate were not to make it out of the elimination round and say they got the lowest amount of first choice votes, the only downside is that your vote wouldn't transfer. But that is just something that we won't know until people start voting and we see results. So it's best to rank them if you like them, but there's no harm in only ranking one if there's only one candidate you truly can stand behind.
Is this something you're seeing a lot of? I mean, what's sort of the big thing that you're hearing from voters so far? And I'd love to hear from both Hayden and Lauren about this. Hayden, if you want to start, what is the Lieutenant Governor's office hearing from voters about how the process has been working this election?
Yeah, we haven't really been hearing much from voters just yet. I think with ballots just recently going out, people are still kind of waiting to see what's going to go down and what's going to happen. From the meetings that we've had where people have been discussing the ranked choice voting, it's kind of mixed emotions. There are some people that really like the ability and the opportunity to rank different candidates and have the opportunity, like I mentioned earlier with my ice cream analogy, to have an option if your ice cream choice is gone. But there are some people who really just don't like that idea. And so we're getting kind of mixed emotions. But as for the voters in the actual cities that are doing this ranked choice voting, we haven't really heard much from them. It's been pretty quiet so far. We're hoping we get a lot more information in once that voting process is done, once the ballots have been sent in or dropped off, and people can kind of reflect on the experience about it.
Lauren, did you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. In all the awareness stuff that we've done, and a lot of the like face-to-face interactions I've had with voters or emails or phone calls, I'd say Salt Lake City voters specifically seem pretty excited about it. Most people I've spoken to, I'd say honestly 90% of the voters I've spoken to are very excited about it, already have some sort of knowledge of it, and are excited to be able to put that into practice. In fact, some of the emails and comments I've gotten are people who are disappointed that they live in District 4 or 6 because they don't get to do it. But we have had, similar to Hayden said, I'd say about 10% of the feedback we've gotten is just people who don't like that they can rank and are maybe a little, they're just unsure of the process in general. But we've just been trying to sort of combat that with education and awareness and try to ease their fears of it. But I'd say overall, Salt Lake City residents and voters have been pretty excited about it. So we're excited to see it go into action and then hopefully hear back from voters what their thoughts are afterwards.
Nice. As we head to wrap up, and I'd love to hear from both of you, and Hayden, if you want to go first, just if there's one bit of information you want voters to know from the Lieutenant Governor's office about ranked choice voting, what would that be?
Yeah, I think really the biggest piece of information that I can pass out is if you have any confusion on your ballot, just read the instructions. We want to make sure that people are filling their ballots out as correctly as possible so that those votes can be valid and get counted. We want to make sure that your votes are heard and that you can get the candidates that you want in there. So the best way to do that is to make sure your ballot is filled out properly. And we understand that ranked choice voting is different. Your ballot will look different, but the instructions on there are designed in a way to help you kind of navigate that process. So just make sure that if there's any questions, you're reaching out to your county, you're reaching out to the city, the state, whatever it may be, get those questions answered because we want your votes to count.
And Lauren, what about you? What would you say the big takeaway for Salt Lake City voters in specific would be?
Yeah, I'm sort of piggybacking off of Hayden, but I think making sure that you truly understand, like you said, how to fill out your ballot. One of the big things that we've been trying to push on Salt Lake City voters is that you can't skip a ranking. I think that's one of the largest sources of confusion is that you can't say this person's my top choice, this person's my bottom choice, and skip that in between. The tabulation software will only pick up basically your first choice, and the statute doesn't allow for you to skip a ranking is what we've kind of been told by Salt Lake County. And so we're really just trying to encourage voters, if you have questions, like Hayden said, please read your ballot instructions, please contact our office. We have explanation videos and sample ballots, and my email is always open. And so is my phone. I'm just here to help and get everybody's ballot to be as perfect as possible first try.
So Lauren, Hayden, I really want to thank you both so much for being here to discuss and answer questions about ranked choice voting for us. For those of you watching, for more information about ranked choice voting, don't hesitate to visit the website Salt Lake City has put up. That's slc.gov/RCV, or email elections@slcgov.com. And I would really invite you, with Capital City News, our news show, we invite people to, we tell people that the best way to stay engaged is to stay informed. And you can do that by following the city at all of our social media outlets, which would be at SLC.gov on Twitter or Instagram. You can subscribe to us on YouTube or Facebook here, and or you can watch us on Channel 17. But for Lauren and Hayden, I want to thank you all for watching and paying attention, and go out there and vote. So thank you all so much.